We're eternally grateful that you guys could be here. We know it's late in the day, but we're thrilled that we had the opportunity to share a little bit about our game that's coming out here, talking a little bit about some of the adventures that we had while bringing it to life, especially late on the third day. It's really cool to have everybody around here. So Burn the Lot, Reinventing Gravity and Hunting Carnies, because Carnies are just creepy. A little bit about us before we jump into this. My name is John Kreisberg, General Manager for App and Product Development at Propaganda 3. This is my colleague Cameron Calder. He's Creative Director at Propaganda 3. We are located in Kansas City, Missouri, so in the middle of everything, I suppose, and in the middle of nowhere, as some people seem to believe, but we think it's a pretty vibrant and cool town. It's an interesting place to be, and it's kind of fun to come out here and start to see some of the community that's out here, and we're also wondering how we bring that community back into Kansas City. A little bit about us. We actually started development on this particular app a number of years ago, but we're excited here that within the next month, we'll be releasing Burn the Lot on iOS and Android. So this is really kind of our pre-postmortem, so we appreciate the opportunity to rehearse. Hopefully basically what we're going to talk about today is really how we are getting ourselves to the starting line. We've been seeing a lot of stuff in the last couple of days and really studying intently, especially some of the sessions that have been in this room today, talking about marketing, and once you get to that starting line, what needs to happen after that point. Propaganda 3 it's kind of interesting. We're not an indie game developer, but we are finding ourselves carrying ourselves, putting on the clothes of an indie game developer. We're actually a digital production company in Kansas City that supports advertising agencies, doing websites, landing pages, emails. We were heavy into Flash. We're heavy into lots of different things. We're not a game developer. But one of the interesting things about what we do is we always believe in professional development. We always believed in learning new tricks, improving our craft all along the way. And it's not done in an abstract. It's done that if we're going to learn something, we want to apply it immediately. We've been playing around with Unity since about 2008, 2009, so good old version 2. And rather than kind of dancing around the edges of the platform, we decided to kind of plunge headlong into it and start talk about actually developing a game. It has its origins somewhere else, and I'm going to turn it over to Cam to talk a little bit about where Burn the Lot came from.
Okay. So before we talk about the game that we're going to be discussing today, every game has an origin to it, has a starting point, and this one did as well. And it just happened to be a completely different other game concept and game mechanic. So Falling Awake, the whole crux behind it was we had this character who worked at an energy drink company, and the energy drink company was feeding energy drinks into the water supply and basically turning everyone into mindless zombies because they couldn't get sleep. So our character was trying to figure out what was going on here, and he was trying to do it through a subconscious, so he was forcing himself to go to sleep. So the game mechanic behind it was two parts. One where he was a falling game, so he would fall and trying to collect things that would keep him asleep, teddy bears, anything like that, and avoid things that would knock him out of that sleep. So energy drinks, sugar, whatever. And he'd be falling towards these planets, and on these planets is where he would find out more information, meet these new people, and just kind of figure out what all is going on. So there's two pieces there, the falling piece and that sort of adventure mechanic on this planet. So as we dug into it, at the time, it was myself and another developer who kind of were concepting this, and we're like, man, there's no fucking way that we can do this with just 2 or 3 people. So we just didn't have the resources for it, and we're like, well, we still want to do something with it, so let's take the pieces that we like from it and build from there. So one of the planets had a carnival on it. We're like, man, this is really cool. We really dig this carnival culture. It's just this really fascinating sort of like underground scene. So it's these people that either really unique in character, or they're just like swindlers, or just going in and trying to capture people's basically money by entertainment and jetting out. So that was something that we found really, really interesting. We're like, man, it'd be great to build a game off of this. So the other thing that we found out about Carnies is that they have their own language, which is really quite fascinating. And we stumbled across this burn the lot. And burn the lot in Carney slang means to historically cheat and swindle locals so thoroughly that they don't allow any carnivals back in their town for a long time. We're like, wow, that's cool. That's like it's the perfect enemy, and we can really feel like we can build something out of that. So we're like, well, we really want to do something with the planet too. So interstellar Carnies made sense to us. So for those, it's Carnies that travel from planet to planet. They take over the natives on that planet by hypnotizing them. So we sneak in the energy drink motif, kind of that zombie idea. And so they turn the natives on their side, so you're kind of having to fight the natives and the Carnies. So interstellar Carnies, they're stripping a planet of as much resources as possible and leaving with no intent of ever returning. So the globe came in. We're like, man, this is such a cool landscape to try and like work around. It's really interesting. We're all fans of Super Mario Galaxy. It's just really kind of neat. The little big planet and menu system. I mean, basically anything that's kind of wrapped around a globe we're into. We saw the Zombieland poster. We're like, man, if we can make something like half as cool as this, then we're like in there. So that's kind of what we did. This is one of our scenes. This is on the minor planet. And we kind of just went from there, and we'll kind of give you an insight into how we kind of got there. We also have this main character that's kind of our protagonist. His name's the Carney Cop, and he's the one that's going in and fighting off the Carnies and trying to restore justice and free them for the natives. So with that, I'm going to show this little video here, kind of explain.
Burn the lot. Of all the things a Carney can utter, this bit of lingo is probably the worst. Maybe I've been doing this too long, but I've gotten used to the fact that you can't save every rube from being parted from their hard-earned coins. But lately, things have been different. Sure, the Carnies are hypnotizing and stealing like always, but they seem to be lingering a bit long. Cherry picking. The whole thing reeks of a plan, and Carnies don't plan. Time to figure out what's going on.
All right, so what we did was we took this big grand idea that we had from Falling Awake, and knowing that we didn't have the resources to pull it off, we stripped out everything that we felt we didn't need or couldn't tackle, and crunched it down to something we could do. And at that point, we're thinking, man, we'll probably just do like a shooter game, something that's more like a mini gore or something along those lines. And the more we thought about it, we thought we were kind of doing somewhat of an injustice to these Carney characters by not giving a narrative. And since we were able to condense it down and have that core to build from, adding the narrative on top of that and kind of like building up was a lot easier for us to swallow and pull off. So this is what our level initially looked like. This is how we concepted it. So taking something from a flat plane and trying to build a level off that, it seemed pretty easy. And then we're like, oh shit, we gotta wrap this around the globe. How are we gonna make our minds work like that? So pipe cleaners and a big ball, and we just hung it up and kind of mapped out how we're gonna create our layers and show like where we wanted these represent fortune teller spawners, so they would spawn the different enemies towards you, and we kind of just built it from there.
So it's kind of careful what you wish for, because we immediately kind of ran into our first obstacle. And again, the whole idea, this was kind of a learning exercise for us. So I'm going to go ahead and make the disclaimer. I'm the marketing guy, kind of the general manager guy. I'm not a Unity developer. As a matter of fact, our core development team, is the two folks who are really banging away at this are back home, just basically trying to get us to the point where we can be ready to submit to the App Store here next week after the holiday in the US. But the first thing we started to run into as we started to look at this sort of globe mechanic was the issues with gravity. Now, basically for Unity out of the box, we're dealing with gravity in a flat plane. So it looks, if we simplify everything, it looks, pretty straightforward what we see here. Our little guy sitting in the middle of a plane area. Well, what we wanted to do is we wanted to have this spherical plane surface and have all the properties of that. You can start to now imagine perhaps one of the first issues that we're going to go run into. Keep going. Keep going. Yeah, that's not going to work. So one of the first things we had to do is we had to basically kind of say, well, these default physics, the default gravity within Unity, we're going to have to mess with this a little bit. And now, again, on my second disclaimer, I'm not a developer. The second disclaimer is there are probably developers in this room who could look at this and go, this is a very simple fix. This is what you do. If you're in this room, please come up to us and tell us how we could have done this better or how we could have burned less cycles on figuring this part out. We'd be more than willing to hear different solutions. We always know that there's more than one way to skin a cat. So as we started to look at this and say, all right, what do we need to do here if we're going to have to forego the basic gravity physics that we're dealing with? The first thing we had to look at was, well, how do we kind of artificially create gravity? So we have this two-script system that kind of works together in concert with each other. One is what we call a faux gravity attractor script, and the other one is a faux gravity body script. Now, both of these things we kind of discovered, I wouldn't say we invented, because we went where everybody else in this room probably goes. We went to the community. We went to the forums. We started asking other Unity developers. We started reading books. Again, this learning process really kind of led us down some interesting rabbit holes of trying to figure out what could work, what didn't work. So within this script, the faux attractor script, and I know it's kind of hard to read from back there, but there's a couple different things. First thing we do is we define a center point on our planet, our sphere. And the little bit at the beginning here is just basically defining a gravitational pull towards that center. Now, the whole sphere is just one big collider, so that's pretty straightforward. The next thing is to have a little bit of drag or friction along the surface. So as our character moves, that they have there's a little bit of play there. The next thing with that, oh, by the way, we don't have to deal with jump. It's not a control in our game. It's really about navigating around the sphere. It's more of a maze mechanic as you kind of go through things. So we knew we could simplify things a little bit there. And then another part of this last bit of the script is just to make sure that we keep our characters upright. So as they're moving along the sphere, let's say they start at that North Pole, when they get to the equator, they're not sitting there skidding along the surface on their back, and when they get to the South Pole, they're not skidding around the surface on their head. So we had to keep that object upright all the way around the sphere. The other script that flashed up there now is what we call our faux gravity body script. Now this really is where we apply this to every single character that moves around the globe. What ends up happening here is it basically calls back to that attractor, activates that. It makes sure that basically a couple things. One, that Unity's default gravity and physics there are kind of turned off. And then it just updates on a regular basis. This is where I get technical and I get dangerous. Updates on a regular basis where the run rate is 50 physics updates per second. So if we're dropping frame rates, we still have gravity acting. And this basically keeps our dude moving around the sphere, sticking where we want him to stick. So, all right, we've kind of now sort of hacked things a little bit. Introduce this hack. We've got the sphere. We're all happy about the fact that we got things sticking to it. The next thing is try to understand dealing with the controls. And then we ran into another problem, which was gimbal lock. So, okay, people nodding. Now, gimbal lock can be an incredibly complex issue here. But basically the idea is where you have these points of rotation. Once you start to approach each other, when you're pressing in one direction, you're really trying to affect two gimbals, hence the idea of a lock. Sometimes it's not even a full alignment. Sometimes it's just getting close to each other. It creates all sort of jitteriness, all sorts of other issues. So the idea here is, so if we have our character moving, and he's sitting here again, once on that North Pole, as he starts to move towards the equator, you can start to see, or excuse me, starting on that X, starts to move towards the equator, you start to see those gimbals start to align. So that became a problem, a little active demonstration of this. All good, all good, all good, pushing forward, pushing forward, pushing forward. still pushing forward, still pushing forward, still pushing forward. Kind of a problem. So the next thing what we end up doing with this is saying, all right, this is just another reason why to just get rid of the custom control, or get rid of the default controller and move towards a custom controller. We looked for all sorts of things that was out there, other things that had been written, and we didn't really find anything. So we really were forced into hand-rolling our own character controller based off of this idea of a force object approach. And the idea is just applying force to that object to move the object in whatever direction it needs to be moved. So we got rid of the gimbals and we're able to pick this up. It was the solution that we needed. It was also a very simple solution, so we were able to keep a lot of different things out of it and kind of lower overhead from an overall development standpoint. Obstacle number 2. So we have a planet, it has gravity, we're able to move a character around it. Now we need to get our enemies around it, so we have this idea of you're chasing the Carney cop around. So we were dealing with this idea of setting enemy waypoints, and in our world we look at waypoints as kind of coming in 2 flavors. One is the predefined paths upon which, when an enemy is spawned, how they're going to move around in an area, kind of laying in wait for our Carney cop. And then the other idea of a waypoint is when they come into some close proximity with the Carney cop, how they start to move towards them, and they recognize the Carney cop's location and start to move towards them to do whatever they're going to do to our hero. So again, going back to our globe, what we found is when we tried to set a waypoint that was across the equator, again, we're kind of in this sort of default mode that we had created, customized from those last bits that we were talking about. They would start to approach the equator and move, and they would stop. So we're kind of scratching our heads on this for a little bit and trying to figure out, all right, what's going on here? For some reason, the AI is thinking that it had arrived where it needed to arrive. Well, we kind of forgot something, which is we're still dealing with kind of a sphere sitting on top of a flat plane. So while that point might have been on the other side of the equator, you can draw a line to the top point of where it was, and that's why I was saying, I am where you want me to be. With this whole idea of an absolute sort of coordinate system wasn't going to work out. So then we took a different approach to it and say, all right, so there is no such thing as up. There is no absolute up. We have to define up to every character, our own Carney cop and every non-player character that's going to be moving around this globe. So then the idea became that, all right, if we're going to deal with that, we can use that set look rotation. And so as our character moves around the globe, up is always going to be relative. And so everything was going to be based off of direction and distance. And all of a sudden our AI is working and we have now Carnies chasing our cop around the globe. Again, there's probably different ways of fixing this, different ways of solving it. People who are much more clever than we are, again, love to hear it. This is what we came up with, and we were pretty pleased that we were at least able to kind of now start to honor this mechanic that we had created. The rest of it was then kind of hand-rolling the rest of that AI. We had to look at aiming. We had to look at firing. We had to deal with all that sort of stuff. But again, we were able to kind of keep that overhead low because we were just kind of trying to be as simple could be within the development mechanic of it. Once we kind of have those pieces figured out, then we went back into it and kind of started thinking about, all right, we need to now build out the rest of this visual world.
All right. So once we figured that out, and we'd done a prototype, I'll go ahead and show you this prototype because it's always fun to see some of the early broken pieces. So have our character here. Oh, get past these dudes.
They try to hug you to death.
Right. So you can see that we got him working around. It's moving around the globe. At this point, our enemy AI script wasn't quite finished. So we called these Zoolander bots because they can only turn right. They're afraid to turn left. So see him do that again. There we go. Yep. We had a lot of good fun with that. Yeah.
There's a game in that.
So we're like, man, now we just got to make it look good. We looked at a lot of inspiration. Macbeth is one that had a big influence on what we were trying to do. I don't know if you guys know who this is, but he's a UK artist, specializes in this sort of like black and white, nods to the old cartoon era, but with a sort of like a nice spin to it. We looked at a lot of papercraft, excuse me. We liked that sort of like modeling style. It's something that we could do and keep the poly count really low, as you see here. So we did a number of different sketches trying to figure out what our player body is actually going to look like. A few sketches of what the planet would look like. Then we kind of figured out a little bit of what our character would look like. We started to apply some textures to the environment. And when we put this in the game and started playing it on the device, we noticed that we made a really, really, really dark environment, which is cool. But we're making this for iOS and Android, so as soon as you take it outside, you're playing a black screen. You couldn't see the character, you couldn't see the environment, and so we're like, we need to brighten it up some. And since we're dealing with Carnies and this sort of like Carnie culture, we felt like we'd be doing an injustice if we weren't adding some more bright pops of color to it. So we ended up something like this. So this is our Carnie cop. This is our protagonist. He's the one who is after the scum Carnies, trying to bring him to justice. Get a look at some of our Carnies here. And another shot. So, since we're dealing with Carnies, we have basically a vast array of different types of Carnies we can choose from. We started with a few that we thought were really kind of interesting. The acrobat, the clown, lizard lady, tattooed man, knife thrower, and fortune teller. All with slight different abilities, things that they kind of do a little bit differently. So the clown, he'll throw exploding pies at you. Knife thrower is obviously throwing knives, and the fortune teller is kind of our leading character on the antagonist side. It's where he is the one who will send hypnotizing balls at all the enemies, or all the natives, excuse me, and hypnotize them. So we had to have our victims. So we have a cowboy, a miner, and Sugar Skull. We thought that sort of diverse language of environments would be kind of something interesting. Really wasn't a rhyme or reason for why we picked these. We just thought it was kind of interesting culture. Maybe it's because we're from the Midwest, we chose the cowboys. I don't know. The miners we probably picked because we were looking to invest too much, and that black and white motif was like, cool, yeah. And the Sugar Skull, we just thought that culture is really exciting. And our Carnie cop. So, one thing I wanted to talk about when we were building the visual world is we wanted to keep costs down, of course, and try and keep things moving forward quickly. So we created assets that we felt were unique to our space, things that were interesting and lended themselves to what we're trying to create. But we also used the asset store quite a bit. So things like rocks, plants, even like some magic effects. The asset store is our best friend. So things that were a little bit more generic are like, well, we could create these and spend X amount of art time trying to model these in Cinema 4D, or we could just pay a small fee on the asset store and do a little bit of texture reworking, and we're good. So it seemed like a no-brainer for us. I'm going to mark off some of the helpful tools from the asset stores, just kind of, if you guys are looking for good ones, these are ones that we had a lot of luck with. The Rock Pack, Dexsoft Games, they do all great stuff. And all their packs are very consistent, so it's high poly and low poly connected, or different sets. The cartoon effects were good. Shrook and Magic packs, we like those a lot. Prime 31, I see a Prime 31 person back there. I don't know if you're with them, but if you are, thank you. And Mixamo, we use Mixamo quite a bit as well for the same reason. So before, what we would do with our characters is obviously we would just rig them inside of Cinema 4D and painstakingly animate. It was crazy when there's something like Mixamo out there. I know you guys have probably heard a lot about them. They've been kind of quite a hit this week, but I think for a good reason. So we were able to just rig our characters and get running with all their animation set. So, as we're trying to map around this visual world, we kind of, from the art side, ran into a little bit of a challenge, not as much as the dev side, but something similar. I'll jump over and kind of show you what we had to do. So, we have our world here, and I had this Carnie cop ship down here, and what we initially did, and this is just us coming from, hey, we're gonna make a game. We've made games on flat planes. This is how we would move things. So we would move over like this, move down, get a rotate out. Sucked, it was horrible. So this is something that we figured out, super obvious once we did it, but we're like, well, we have this global offset for the dev side, and they're kind of just, the center point is what they're doing, and mapping the objects, or making the objects run around from that offset point. Why don't we just try the same thing? So we keep our offset point at 0, 0, put our prefab inside of there, and put it up to 56, and then we just rotate. We're like, yes, this is gonna be awesome. Made it a lot easier, So a very simple thing, once we figured out that, man, we were really dumb for trying to move that around, and we figured that out, we're like, it really helped quite a bit. So at that point, we started adding our waypoints. There's a coin collection system in here that we would randomly spawn. You see those in the red. And then we also have our enemy spawners, which are what spawn the natives, the Carnies, anything that you're fighting against. So, show a little demo of kind of what this looks like on the surface here. Oops, hang on one second.
Carnies sent a little parade through town last night that came home with some gold and a charm which gives fortune tellers full body control. Only a Carnie could think that was a good idea.
All right. So you can see on the right side of the screen, that's us playing the game, and then on the left is what's kind of happening around the globe. So you can see these enemy characters. You see that sugar skull kind of walking back and forth between the waypoints, and once our Carnie cop sort of introduces himself, then they'll attach onto him and start moving forwards. So. And you can go around, you got the knife thrower kind of taking you out, take out the spawner tent, collect your item. So. There you go. All right, so here's just a little demo video. It shows a little more gameplay. This is our weapons trailer. Thank you.
So this is what happens when internal projects and sort of labors of love go awry. they turn into games. They turn into really expansive games, and it's been fun to watch this. I'm fairly new to Propaganda 3, though. I've known these guys for a long time. I've known Cam for a while, and they've been kind of going at this since about 2010, actively building since about 2011. There's a couple of different Unity updates somewhere in there. There's lots of learning in there, and then I got thrown into the mix about 4 months ago, stuck my finger up in the air and said, we're going to launch around here. And it's been a fun race now to try to get that all finished up and get it done in good style. We did learn some really interesting things along the way, and the key takeaways for us as we, again, kind of start to enter this space, you know, getting ourselves to the starting line. Setting a worthy challenge, I think, is a big takeaway on this one for us. The team had danced around Unity for a while, you know, a year or so, you know, kind of playing around the edges and using it for little projects, things for clients and stuff like that. It's kind of like using, you know, Creative Suite or any other, you know, massive software package or whatever. Like using Creative Suite to just make PDFs. It's ridiculous. You know, you got Unity sitting around here. You got to figure out what you're going to do with it. So finding a worthy challenge to really learn the tool, I think, was a big piece of this. Another key takeaway was seeking focus. And I think I'm going to let Cam talk a little bit more about this one, but you kind of, where we started and where we ended up were two different places.
Right, so what we mean by this is we started out with this big grand plan. We're going to make this huge game, just huge ideas, and then we're like, we only have like 3, 5 people who can do this. That's not going to work. So we took it down to something that was a lot more manageable because we were really devoted to trying to put something out there. And once we were able to kind of figure out what that was and we felt comfortable being able to do that, then we can build from there. So.
A third takeaway for us, plan well, but be flexible. There's a lot of planning that's gone into this since the beginning. We have too many Google Docs to even count in terms of level design, objectives, sub-objectives, copy points, everything that just kept going and kept going and kept going and kept morphing. But the morph part was the interesting part about it. The flexibility part of it was that the game, after a certain while, and maybe this is just too many late nights or just getting a little too crazed around it, it kind of started speaking to you because it's like you've got this world of carny culture. You've got this cop who, by the way, has a backstory, but how much of the backstory do we reveal? There's this quest now that he's trying to help out these natives on these different sets of planets. Well, what are the Carnies trying to do on these planets? You know, like you said at the beginning of that very first video, they're doing something different than just taking people's money. What we knew is that we also had to respect the player in this. Mini-gore is all, you know, well and good and fun, but at some point you also need a story just trying to keep people coming in and keep them hooked. So that flexibility part was basically us kind of going back in and saying, there needs to be a story to this. There needs to be some the respect for the player to know that there's going to have to be more of a hook than just mayhem.
Yeah, and really just be able to step back and look at your game as a whole and say, man, this is what I'm building fun. We did that a couple of times, and the answer was no. And so being able to make those necessary adjustments, I think, were really crucial.
And I think the other part is that we're really excited that the flexibility part of this is going to play into what's next. Once we actually get it out there in the hands of more people, we get past play testing and QA, what are they going to want to see? How are they going to interact with it? I'm sure the game strategies of how they go through this stuff and how they deal with things are going to blow us away. We're no longer indicative of the type of player that will pick this up, where we've become too good at the game. You become really good at your own game, so you start to lose that objectivity. So we're really looking forward to seeing what they think of it, and how we'll have to adjust and the flexibility that's going to introduce. Last key takeaway, Carnies are really creepy. I mean, if you get into the culture and you get into something, we really kind of struck on something here from a theme standpoint that really kind of kept us going. If you're going to have to live with a project for a long time, you really have to love your idea, and you kind of have to, you know, find new things about it that are really exciting. So, I mean, when we start, I mean, the weirdest behavior I've taken on of just being involved with this for the last few months is every time I see a roadside carnival, and this is about the time of year you start to see them more in Missouri and Kansas, you see a Ferris wheel up on the side of the road in a mall parking lot, I find myself pulling over and taking photos and sending it to Cam and saying, dude, burn the lot, you know? And you almost want to go, kind of go through it, and every once in a while you go through it. Carnivals after dark, when you kind of go work down that midway, it is kind of a creepy experience. So it's like we kind of struck on something here that was fun. I guess so the key takeaway is find something also here that's interesting for you as you go into what you're doing.
And I like to add flames into all my presentations I give, whether it be client-based or like this. So I did it once, and I did it twice.
So thank you very much. We'll have some time for Q&A too. If you have questions, you could just step up to the mic. We have stickers for people who ask questions. So. Yeah, I know, the mic's all the way back there. It's kind of cruel, sort of. Make you walk. Let me see if it's on. There you go.
Hello. Yeah. Okay. So I was curious of the projectile, of all the projectiles, they were going curving according to the surface of the planet. So I'm curious of what did you use? Do you use the same method of solving the projectile direction, like it was curving along the surface of the planet, or like this? What was the solution? Did you use a Bezier curve or some kind of, or it was the same, like offsetting the pivot point of every projectile coming out of the gun? So I'm just curious of that.
It really is that force that we're applying to the center point of the gravity, and anything that we tag with that faux body attractor, saying it to pull down, then that's what's causing it to warp around. So if you saw like the bullets that were kind of working around, it's using that same script.
So it's just vector force, it's not kind of a spline solution to targeting. Okay.
Nope. Nope.
With regards to you doing a planet, obviously there's a planetoid, there's obviously a whole other side of the planetoid that is kind of like a mystery to you. Did you find that there was, how did that affect your design of the game? You know, having this part that was a mystery versus like, did it affect it in any ways negatively, or was it all positive, or vice versa, or what?
There's a lot of things that we stumbled across when we decided that we're going to do it as a planet. Things that we didn't really encounter or expect to encounter. Like, I guess the pleasant surprise of not knowing what exactly is over the edge and how many Carnies you're going to be presented with, or how many spawners you're going to be presented with. We think that's kind of a fun aspect to the game. So. It's
disorienting. I think the first time I played it, I was messing around with it, it was really disorienting. As somebody who really enjoys first-person shooters, you get very comfortable with a map and understanding where things are. Even in some of these where we use different configurations, so we have the three levels, the three planets that you work around, there's still enough alteration that we can make to that and keep the same basic structure to it that still is disorienting from one level to the next. So that was kind of like a surprise and delight thing, which was nice from, I think, a level of effort standpoint, that we didn't have to work that hard to disorient yet, kind of introduce that level of challenge into it. And then we could really concentrate on the number of spawners, the number of Carnies, how difficult those were, balancing that with the weapon attributes and all those other pieces. So we were able to kind of play with other things along the way too, to complicate it, I guess.
I was wondering if you had a specific reason for choosing waypoints over nav mesh, and if it was just something you needed for your AI, or if it was just a decision you made because it's a little simpler to program.
Like I said, we're not the devs. I think he had to create something that obviously worked around a planet, and for him, waypoints were the easiest. So I wish I could give you a little bit more of an in-depth answer to it. but that really wasn't quite our side. I can give you his email if you want to inquire, though.
Yeah, it's just interesting to me because I've just recently programmed a gravity thing and I used NavMesh and I had the AI moving around on the planet, so it's like basically the same thing you guys did.
Oh, perfect.
I've got it on my laptop if you want to see it.
I think at the time when he was dealing with that particular problem, he was looking at Dan was looking at a book called Unity Hotshot, which kind of has some interesting code examples and some concepts to kind of work around to start to develop your skills. He thought it was interesting. Sometimes it's just like in any of those sort of books. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's incomplete, sometimes you try to do it and it doesn't work at all. But I think he kind of found himself, he kind of fell into an approach that was working at the time. So I think one of the interesting things too is, as we kind of look at it, is like if we're going to continue with this mechanic, or maybe we kind of strip the theme away from it altogether and theme in a different way, but kind of keep this sort of spherical plane area. Maybe there's other ways to kind of go after some of these issues that we encountered. Obviously the platform has evolved, over the time period we've been working on it.
I was wondering about the team structures, like how many artists, devs, and how long of a period of time for the entire game.
So the size of the team and how long the cycle's been?
Yeah.
What was that? Sorry.
It's like the team structure, like how many devs, how many artists have worked on this game.
How big the team is? There's 2 devs who are devoted pretty tight on it, and one who is devoted full time to it, and one's kind of a supporting asset. For the artwork, I led most of it, but we used a lot of internal resources to kind of just jump in and help out along the way. So there's a lot of typography assets and menu assets and stuff we needed to do as far as that goes that we kind of farmed out inside of our shop. So there's been a lot of people that have touched it over the span of the past year and a half, but the core team is probably about 3 or 4. So.
Thanks.
It's been an interesting, the other part about, again, we're a digital production company, so if somebody had some spare time and their workbench was clear, and we had things that needed to be done within the game, we were able to hand them something and say, hey, we need these graphic assets prepped, or need to do a little bit of this stuff, or as we were starting to build out assets for a microsite and social media and these other things, because we knew it wasn't just the game. We knew we had to come up with the whole package for it. We were able to kind of hand some things off, but it's a pretty tight core team for the whole thing.
I know you guys aren't the devs, but what did you use for versioning control and everything else in the smaller team like that?
What's that?
The versioning control?
Versioning control? We checked everything in through GitHub. Is that what you're asking? Yeah. Yeah, we use GitHub.
Yeah, it's been an interesting process of tracking all that stuff. Putting the game through QA has been very interesting too, because we're trying to take a traditional QA process of a digital production company, apply that to game QA. Again, another thing where we're learning quite a bit, the differences between traditional digital production and game QA. So while we're marching towards this date that we can kind of pick out of the air, dev wasn't slowing down, but we just needed to get into play testing more. We needed to get into the QA part of it more. We needed to start to test the in-app purchasing system and the sandbox for Game Center and all those different things. So keeping track of that stuff has been maybe a little hairy at times, especially as we start to go through our bug tracking tool, those pieces. So as we make that turn from a production company into having a product, we're learning quite a bit.
Yeah, and as far as bug tracking goes, we use Sifter, and maybe that's a product of where we come from in that sort of digital space, dealing with clients.
Any other questions?
Okay, well, awesome. John was lying about the stickers. They're for everybody if anyone wants one. So.
Yeah, definitely come on up. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it.
All right.